Hey folks, this is Mick with Blitz TCG, and after recording this video about 17 times and having it be 20 minutes long each time, we have to cut a few things out. I'll first just start by saying I've been with Ergo now for about 2 years and have been developing Blitz on the platform for that same amount of time. I'm very passionate about the Ergo blockchain and have sort of taken it upon myself to refresh some of the user tutorials that are out there on the various, let's call them functionalities within Ergo. And so the video that we're covering today is on the Ergo Mixer, and this was sort of a polled endeavor that I conducted on Reddit to see what you all would find most valuable. Ergo Mixer was pretty high on that list. So let me start with just a few disclaimers before we dig into it. First disclaimer, my opinions are my own opinions. They are not the opinions of the Ergo Foundation. They are simply my own thoughts on really everything that I have to say here. That's how you know the video is going to be good, is when you have disclaimers, right? Second disclaimer is that this is for purely educational purposes. I am not supporting your mixing actions. I am simply trying to educate you on a mixing platform and show you how to use it. The transactions you see in this video will only be to myself, so I will only be transferring to and from addresses that I personally own. So do keep in mind whatever your country's restrictions are on this type of stuff and do your own diligence there. Very timely, what you're seeing on the screen here, just this morning before I sort of put myself together enough to compose this video, the Coin Bureau posted something very timely, and that is South Korea is essentially shutting down or trying to sanction mixers and mixing ecosystems. And so that's where I want to start, is just first by saying Ergo is sort of aptly put to mitigate this risk. One, Ergo is a very decentralized blockchain by itself, and the Ergo mixing platform is actually decentralized too, so it's all self-hosted, it's all self-custodial, just meaning that, as you will see and hear in just a moment, we are the people that are running the mixers. You know, it's not some centralized agency that the government can go and shut down. So folks can try to shut down something like the Ergo Mixer, but it'd be akin to trying to shut down Bitcoin, and we know how well that's worked. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Just some high-level comments first. There's a lot of information out there about mixers, and to cut down the length of this video, I'm not going through any of it. I will, however, link it out in the description below. There's a couple videos, one out there from CW from about a year ago. There's one out there from the Ergo platform. I'd say this one's a little more outdated, but helpful if you want like a more elaborated explanation of how some of this stuff works. I actually prefer some of the Monero videos from like 6 years ago that really delve into depth about how all this stuff works. For example, they have this 3-minute video on stealth addresses with these nice fun animations, and those concepts really haven't changed, right? They've just sort of evolved over time. So if you're looking to educate yourself, these are some places you could start. There's also several articles on what mixers are in the Bitcoin environment, right from the Ergo platform website. There's sort of an initial post on what Ergo Mixer was meant to be. I would say my preferred sort of documentation here is from the docs.ergoplatform.com website, and it essentially covers here towards the bottom covert addresses and stealth addresses and what they are, as well as sort of points you to other information if you so chose to review it yourself. That's enough preamble. Let's get into doing what I said, which is just showing you how to use this stuff. So the first thing you're going to want to do is navigate on over to the GitHub for Ergo Mixer. Depending on your level of technical expertise, your system setup, you'll know which of these to pick for yourself. Most of us will be using the .exe file. So go ahead and click that .exe file. It's going to download. It's going to do its thing. Install it like you would any other application. I'm not going to go through all that. But once you have it running, you'll see this little icon pop up somewhere, probably on your desktop. And from there, you're going to get a little pop-up that says, hey, now that this is running, go ahead and navigate to localhost 9000. So you open up a browser. You'll type in localhost : 9000. I'm not going to explain why that is. It's just that some applications work this way. That's all you really need to know. And you'll be brought to sort of the main interface for the Ergo Mixer itself. So great. Now we're in the Ergo Mixer. It took all of maybe 2 minutes to get that set up. We're doing good things. High level. I'm not going to go through all of these. But just a couple things to know. Active mixes. These are things you're actively mixing, if that wasn't transparent enough. Mixing history. These are active one-off mixes that I've conducted in the past. Covert addresses. In my opinion, like, this is the bread and butter of this platform, and we'll get to why that is in a second. And then the newer sort of functionality here called stealth address or stealth addresses. And we'll take a look at that too. There's some other things here you can click through. I do want to take a brief sort of pause here to explain what rings are in layman's terms, right? Removing some of the gray with respect to the verbiage here, this technical jargon. All rings are sort of like pre-composed groupings of certain amounts of ergo that are going to be mixed, right? So say that back to yourself. These are just pre-composed groupings of certain amounts of ergo that are going to be mixed. You could write technical papers on what rings are, but for our purposes, that's all we need to know, and we're going to see why that matters here in just a moment. So let's just go ahead and get into it, right? Let's do a manual mix to start. I want to mix just one transaction to somebody, or maybe multiple people, and be done with the platform. So I'll come over to active mixes, click start new mix. Great. You can see I can select several fungible tokens on the Ergo platform. I assume Rosen will be on here eventually. And for demonstration purposes, I'm actually going to do a high amount of erg first. So I'm going to do 110 erg. And then you're going to get to this screen, you're like, holy shit, Mick, like I need a degree in computer science to make sense of this. You really don't. Super simple. Let me go through a few examples for you. I'm trying to mix 110 ergo, right? I'm trying to put more privacy essentially on top of this 110 ergo that I want to distribute. So I have some options here. Let me just click through it because it's just easy to demonstrate. Highly recommend you follow along with me here, even if you're only using a couple ergo. It'll be the easiest way for you to get familiar with it and not be afraid of it. It really is super simple. It's more simple than it looks once you start actually playing around with it. But let's say I want to put 10 ergo into the one erg box. I want to put, let's say, none into this box and 1 into this box. Now you see I have 0 erg that is left to be distributed. Taking a step back, what did I just do, right? Well, I said I had 110 ergo that I want to mix. I put 10 of that ergo into these one ergo sort of little groups, right? And then I put 100 ergo into this bigger group. I could, however, just click the distribute all button, and then you see it just automatically sort of divides it out among the least amount of boxes that it can, or groups that it can. So in this case, it put 100 erg into this group and 10 erg into this group. If I go back and I change this to like 115, and again, just play around with me here. You're not going to hurt anything. It's not like you're, going to break something. Just play around with this as I play around with it. Hit distribute all again, and you can kind of see what happens. Right now, you have 100 here, 10 here, and 5 here because we added that 5 extra erg. But for today, and I would suggest if you're doing this yourselves, just do like 2 erg, right, to get a feel for how this works. So when I enter 2 erg in here, if you notice, I, of course, can't use the bigger sort of groupings. I have to use this 1 erg grouping. So that's great. That's super simple. Fine. Not really much I can do here other than that, right? So I'll click the next button, and you'll get to the point where it says, well, where do you want to send this mixed erg to, right? Where do you want to send these different groups of erg that you're mixing to? So you could send them both to the same address, or, you could perhaps select a couple different addresses. So I'm just going to grab a couple of my addresses here. I might even just send it back to myself. It honestly doesn't matter. But I'll put in 2 of my ergo addresses here. And so essentially all I'm saying is after this gets done mixing, send the mixed erg to these addresses. So if I was sending 1,000 erg, maybe I'm using 4 of the 250 erg groupings, I could send them all to the same address, or I could split them into 4 different addresses. It just depends on what I'm trying to do, right? So different use cases for different people. There are also other settings up here that are a little more sophisticated. I'm not going to play around with these today, but you're welcome to click through them because, again, you're not going to break anything if you do. Don't be afraid to click around a little bit, especially if you're only playing with a couple bucks. So then after I do that, the sort of last thing I need to decide here is how much I want to mix this shit up. right? And that's the phrase here. That's a proper slogan for the Ergo mixer. How much do I want to mix this shit up? It's actually not. But for me, I don't need to mix it up too much, and I'm a cheapskate, so I'm only going to mix it up for about 30 rounds. Again, don't worry about what that means. It's just essentially how befuddled is it going to be? How mixed up is it going to be? How many different avenues would somebody have to take to sort of trace it back to its source? So you could really bring this up high, which you'll be probably waiting a long time for it to be completed, or you could just drop it pretty low and have it done within a few hours. So then after that, I click Start Mixing. It says, hey, thanks for doing that. And now this is the last step, all right? So far we've sort of set up our amount that we want to mix. We split it up into sort of our little mixing categories, and we said just how much we want to mix it up. From here, you actually have to kick it off. So if you see here, you're going to see this little orange time box pop up, and it's going to say, hey, please deposit this much ERG to this address, right, to this address. So I'm just going to show you how to go about that. I use Nautilus, so I'll come in here. Let me switch to a wallet that actually has enough in here to do that. I'll click Send. I'll click that, I copied that deposit address. I'll throw that in there, and then I need to enter in the exact amount that is shown here. If you overtype, it just essentially gets sent to the Ergo Mixer team as essentially a donation. If you do under the amount, that's okay. Nothing happens. It just sort of queues it up until you finally reach the threshold that you said you wanted to mix. So I'll confirm that. God knows I don't even know what that spending password is. Oh, look at that. And lo and behold, we're done. Give it a few minutes. Let it sort of get through its initial setup and let this come through. It's going to take a little while. But once you do that, and I already have another one set up here, it's going to look like this, where it's going to say, this is your mixing progress. This is how many of those groupings that you're using to do the mixing. And you could even click Show More here. You can see exactly what's going on. If you click Details, you can come in and see sort of the split that you're doing. You can even, click into these and click Set Address and change the withdrawal addresses if you want it. If you notice, it's only gone through 2 rounds of mixing. But if I just wanted to stop it for whatever reason, I could click Withdraw Now and just withdraw it right away, in which case it generates another transaction to then withdraw this Ergo to the wallets that I selected. And that's it, guys. I mean, that's how you do a one-off mix. It looks like it's really complicated. I think it's mostly because the UI just has like so much going on. I would honestly love it if they took this UI and just like really slimmed it down. I mean, there might even be a market for a product like that just kind of bakes in to like your node or something that just like allows you to press one button and do it. But it is what it is. So this is sort of like one-off manual mixes. We just completely finished one of those. I don't find that useful. All right, I'm just being honest. I don't think it's that useful. Really, what you want to set up is a more automated process so that you can more easily do mixes pretty much for all your transactions. That's where this thing called covert address comes in. So a covert address, in layman's terms, is essentially a mixer that is always running. You can just throw stuff at this mixer that you create, and it will just mix that currency as soon as you hit the threshold required to start it. Might sound a little weird at first, but just imagine if what I did before sort of just stayed there, and every time I hit that 2 ERG limit, it mixed it again. All right? Repeat that back to yourself a couple times. It'll make sense. We're going to do it together, though. New covert address. What do I want to call it? I want to call it CW's Shoes. Because I'm trying to support his shoe buying hobby. And I'll come in here and I can again set sort of the mixing threshold, right? I'm a cheapskate and I just want to be a little bit more secure in how I send my transactions. So I'm going to set it to its lowest level. I can add more of these sort of addresses here via an import, or I could just set them later. I'm just going to add a row. And when I come in here, I could, maybe for sake of demonstration purposes, let me just sort of do the same thing I did before. So I could add a bunch of addresses here. Let's just do the same address twice because you can do that, right? Let's just show a few different things. So now, the standard is I'm going to be withdrawing the funds that are mixed to essentially the same address. So then I'll click create covert address. Oh, I made a mistake. I bet that's because I probably, see, and this is why it's fun to play around. I probably can't use the same address twice. Yeah, well, look, we learned together, right? So this is what it's about. Apparently, you can't send it to the same address twice. You have to put a couple different addresses in there. I mean, frankly, that makes a little bit of sense because I guess if you were sending to the same address, mixing wouldn't be all that important now, would it? So, anyways, by default, and this is the key because you're going to look at this and you're going to be like, holy shit, Mick, I have to deposit 250 Ergo for this thing to start mixing? The answer is no. And I think that's why it's a little bit misleading here as far as the value of this thing. If you come in here, oh, I got to click around a little bit. Yeah, that's it. So if you come in here, you click these little dots here, and you go to all assets, you can actually come in here and adjust that deposit threshold. So I'll click change ring, and then I'm gonna use my 1 erg again because I'm playing around with a little bit amount of erg, and I would suggest you do the same. So I'll go ahead and select that, and then if I come back here, you can see, old CW's shoes is just waiting on this amount of Ergo to get to them begin the mixing. Why is this powerful? Why is this powerful? Look at this deposit address. This is an Ergo deposit address for my sort of mixing service. So what I could do is make this deposit address, let's pretend I made it forward facing to all of you. Every time you sent me Ergo to this address, let's say when I sell Blitz cards, the address that we use is this address for where the funds are sent. Every time this threshold of 1.129 erg is hit, it's going to start mixing it and then send it out to whatever addresses I choose to set for. And we didn't set those up in our little experience there. But what we can do, because I've set it up previously, is if we go here and we go to this history, this is just another one that I set up, you can see that I've hit this threshold a few times and there's a few sort of rounds of mixing going on for the amount of times that I've hit that threshold. And you can see I've even completed one here. I ended this one early after about 10 mixes. So the short of it is, right, you can set this up so that when you receive Ergo, you can receive it to this address. So just give people this as your public ID. It hits sort of your mixer here. It mixes your stuff up and withdraws it to the addresses that you said to withdraw it to, without you having to do anything, really. That's powerful, right? So that is, how do you say that word? Anonymity? That's privacy at its best, right? That's privacy at its best. So that's covert addresses. Again, it is basically an ongoing mixer that you don't have to sort of touch, and it just sort of stays operational. The newer thing is stealth address. Stealth address is, again, a similar way to just sort of mask your transactions. I'm not going to get into it too much because this video is already running long. But what you'll notice when you first sort of kick this off is that your client here will have to sync with the blockchain. So if you're the Ergo blockchain. So if you're playing around with this, you're like, man, nothing's happening. It's probably because this isn't synced yet. So just like let this sit for a day, and eventually it'll be synced back up with the current height of the Ergo blockchain. And then you can see things sort of happen in real time. So what are stealth addresses? Stealth addresses are essentially a hidden address. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? It's like an address that is masked from public viewing. Really, the only people that even know what the address is are the people actually sending funds between themselves. Somebody from the outside will have a real hard time sort of walking that back and figuring out whose address it actually is. So let's just like walk through an example here. We'll call this like, Kushti's dev fund, because this is what he uses for his dev fund. Create a new stealth address, literally as easy as it is. And then once you're in here, where's Kushti's dev fund? You'll see over here that we have this stealth public key. And frankly, this isn't that helpful for you for any real purpose. What you want to have is the payment address. Now, you perhaps, maybe let me take a step back. You perhaps could give somebody this public key, and they could sort of generate payment addresses sort of on your behalf. But for me, right, let's say I wanted you to pay me through this stealth address, right? I probably wouldn't give you this. I'd probably come in here and generate a new payment address, and I would copy this and actually send it to you. And believe it or not, this is a valid Ergo address that you can send funds to, this really long ID that you're probably not familiar with seeing. So I would send this to you and I would say, hey, Kushti, I've done a lot of good work with Blitz lately, would love a donation. He'd say, okay, how do you want to receive it? I'd say, please send it through my stealth address via this payment address. And I'd copy this, I'd send it to him, and he would pretty much, and I'll just show you an example of that for the sake of demonstration. Let's go back to one of my wallets here. I'd go back to send here, I'd copy and paste that in. Let's just like send to erg, confirm it, MDB, and there we go. That's it. And then after a few minutes, you're going to see this come in here, and I've already done this for the sake of the video, but you see your balance populates. You can come in here to show the boxes, and just like before, you can set an address to withdraw it to. I don't know. Let's just do it, right? Let's receive or bring it in. We'll do that. Update and withdraw now, and then lo and behold, that stealth received fund, those stealth received funds are now being sent back to my wallet. So, one more step back, and God, I mean, this is just, I thought this video was going to be faster, but even with me moving fast, it still just takes a long time to cover this stuff. Let's take one step back and just think through this, right? If I want to do one-off mixes, because I just want to send one lump sum of funds in a more discrete manner, I could just start a new mix and do it in that manner. If I wanted a more automated way to always mix funds that maybe I'm receiving, I could set up a covert address. And again, essentially, it just mixes things automatically for you as it hits that deposit threshold. And if it hasn't hit that deposit threshold, again, it just sort of builds it up and then it eventually churns through it over time. So there's no harm in sending more than what the deposit threshold actually is. And then I could have a stealth address, which is essentially masking who is sending and receiving that amount of Ergo, so that it just stays between the two people actually conducting that transaction. So me as Joe Schmo is going to have a real hard time knowing and digging up who is actually exchanging those funds, maybe even more so than with the covert address in the mixing process. The last thing I'll say, these are not mutually exclusive, right? These are not mutually exclusive. In fact, you could, theoretically, and I've played around with this, you could come in and send, let's just use this example, you could send me, right, if I generate this payment address, some funds to my stealth address here. And then when I get a balance, I could come in here, let's grab my deposit address for my covert wallet. I could show my boxes, and I've already withdrawn this one, right? So I can't do it now. But I could edit this, paste in my covert address, and then mix it on top of receiving it through the stealth address. So you can use both of these in tandem if you are really looking to cover your tracks. Like, I mean, you'd have to be doing some shady stuff to want to do all that work. But nonetheless, it is possible. But there's less shady stuff too. You know, maybe you have a few decentralized employees, and none of those employees would like their payment information disclosed, because they're sort of just like one-off contractors, and they have their own reasons for not wanting to disclose that sort of information. You could set up an automated process here where for your covert address, let's say each of those employees get paid 250 ERG a week, you could set it up so that you just had an automatic process that hits those wallet addresses every week and then disperses those funds out to those employees. So there's all sorts of cool things you can do with this. Again, if some of what I said didn't make sense, do some reading, or just like spend well, you're not even spending $5. You're going to get most of the money, almost all the money back, because you're just sending the transactions between yourself. But just like play around with $5 and see what happens, right? Like it becomes very familiar pretty quickly as you play around with it. But goddamn, this video is already 25 minutes long, way longer than I expected. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoy using the mixer, or maybe now you can think of a purpose to use it for yourself. Otherwise, please continue to support Blitz. Your support is much appreciated. Love all of you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.